Stuart's talk at the end there about Twitter, the guidelines for Twitter. It was quite amusing the other day to hear that one company had produced some guidelines for its members, for its staff, on using Twitter, which is 140 characters. And the guidelines ran to just over 140 pages, which I thought was very ironic, actually. But anyway, I want to talk to you about some interesting new developments. Some of them may not be so new to you, but the actual applications and the context may be new. I'm often reminded that training and education are a bit like getting onto an airline. You put your trust in a stranger you've never met before, then you sit in rows, and then you're told to turn off all your electronic devices. And you heard this morning that I think Don said, don't turn them off, just put them on silent. Who's got a smartphone? Let's have a straw poll. Hold them up if you've got them. Just don't drop them on someone's head. We may not be insured. Have you got one? Everyone's got one. Yeah, just about. There are people that haven't got them, but most people have these now, and they're becoming quite a common device. They're not that expensive anymore. They work on a reasonably small bandwidth, and they do a lot more than we give them credit for. One of the things I'm going to be doing today is telling you that what you're holding in your hands is literally the future. Okay, we're going to try and establish why that might be. But telling the future is dangerous. This is what a US mayor said when he saw Alexander Graham Bell's wonderful invention for the first time in 1880. One day every town in America will have a telephone. Well, of course, he was right. Every town in America, if you've been there, they do have telephones in America. But people also have them in their pockets, like you have them in your pocket. You see, we can be very accurate about predicting the future when it comes to technology, but we can also be very wide of the mark in terms of its impact and in terms of its its pervasiveness. So it's very difficult. But one of the things I did when I was just leaving nurse education and entering into the higher education sector back in around about 1989, I'm not that old, in 1989, I mentioned to somebody that I thought the future was going to be multimedia. And of course, that's what happened because I could see the trends. 10 years later, I was sat on a panel in a conference in Berlin, Online Educa Berlin, and they asked me the question then, what do you think the future is going to be? And I said, I think it's going to converge on the internet. I think everything's going to combine on the internet. And of course, we look back on the last 10 years, and that's exactly what's happened. I'm not a guru. I'm not, a seer here. I don't have a crystal ball. But here's my prediction for the next 10 years. The future is going to be smart mobile. That's what I think, looking at the trends. And if we think back to multimedia, it brought the world into the classroom. Would you agree? Multimedia brought the world into the classroom. It brought all the experiences, all the simulations, all of the games, etc. into the classroom. My prediction is that smart technologies will take it back out into the world again. Because that's where we see training and education going. I think Jane Hart this morning talked about how we're moving away from the classroom and back out into informal areas of learning, and how can we harness that for companies and for organizations. That's the question. We know this is going to happen, but how are we going to harness it? That's the question that you and I have to answer. If we look at the old kind of style of education, it's very similar to the industrial approach that we saw this morning. You see a family here in about 1950 looking at a screen together. There was probably only 2 or 3 channels available to them, maybe even less than that. It was black and white. It was scheduled for a particular time, and then it went off at around about 10 o'clock, and everyone went to bed because there's nothing else to do. No television. Everyone had the same experience. If we move on to 2009 to 2010, we are family again, but this time everybody's still a family, but they're having different experiences. They're having a similar focus, but different experiences. This is the way I see education and training going in the next 5 to 10 years, using new smart technologies. I'm going to move on very fast here with a quote from Paulo Freire, a Brazilian philosopher, who said, education must begin with the solution of the teacher-student contradiction by reconciling the poles of the contradiction so that both are simultaneously teachers and students. When I stand up in front of my students, I say to them, look, I want you to learn from me, but I also want to learn from you. There's the contract. That's the basis upon which these smart technologies are going to become effective. Another more modern-day guy, Dave Cormier, some of you may have heard of him, he said this: present speed of information based on new technologies has undermined traditional expert-driven processes of knowledge development and dissemination. What that means, in other words, is that the social technologies and the smart technologies will take the expertise and spread it around so that everybody is an expert in something. And then we share it together and we all become experts in what other people are becoming expert in. That's the collaborative process. The guy from BT this morning, forget his name, he said that 70% of learning in an organization is informal. Well, there's my slide, which I suppose echoes that. It's around about 70%, I suppose, if you cut it down. That's quite a lot. How do we harness that, or should we harness it? Well, the self-organized aspects of that cut across both formal and informal, and we can't ignore that fact. Students will do what they're interested in, whether you tell them to or not, and they will ignore the things they're not interested in. Trainees will actually flock towards what they're interested in, what grabs their attention. So either we make it interesting for them by making it smart, making it agile, making it flexible, making it creative, making it innovative, or we do what we've always done and stick them in rows, like the airline pilots. George Siemens, Canadian scholar, he said, we simply have too much information and we can't make sense of it all. It changes too quickly. This is where the teacher comes in. This is where the trainer comes in and says, look, I'm going to filter this for you. Here's some of the stuff that I want you to know about. Go away and find the rest. Bring it all back. But I'm going to start by filtering it for you. That's what smart technologies will help us do as well. And the student may be able, the trainee may be able to do that on their own without the aid of the tutor. But I think that trainers and teachers still have a huge role to play. Arthur C. Clarke once said, if you're thinking about teachers and about the future, any teacher who can be replaced by a computer should be. Personal web tools are going to come into this big time. We're talking about smart technologies. We're talking about a personal tool that you have with you everywhere you go all the time. And there are three general purposes for that. You generate your own content, you share the content, and you organize the content. And from that, supposedly, comes learning. I'm going to add a fourth component there, and that's communication. Without communication between people, learning becomes very two-dimensional. To bring it out so that it has a context and it has a kind of a community aspect to it and a social aspect to it, we need to communicate as well as share. So that's my concept of the personal web tools. And we've already saw cloud computing this afternoon from Stuart. There are four aspects I see from e-learning, the way it's going. If we call it E3.0, these are the four aspects. Distributed cloud computing, extended smart mobile technologies, collaborative intelligent filtering, and 3D visualization and interaction. I'm going to look at number 4 in a minute with you. And we'll give you some examples. I won't show you the videos, that would take too long, but you can go out there and look at YouTube and various other sites, and you can actually see these videos in action. Sir Tim Berners-Lee, anyone heard of him? He said, we need diversity of thought in the world to face the new challenges. We need to be flexible. We need to be aware of the changes and quickly adapt to them. And so do our trainees. We're preparing them for a world of work, and we don't even know what it's going to look like in 2 years' time, let alone in 10 years' time. It's a difficult situation. Here's another model for you to think about. This is where web meets the world. If you imagine the real world and then the virtual world, there's a continuum. But somewhere in the middle, you can use smart technologies to combine both. And if you look at that, there are lots of devices here we can use. QR codes you may have heard of, these two-dimensional barcodes that you're starting to see appearing on airline tickets and various other products. Geomapping, various browsers and geotagging systems, mashups where you're combining lots of sources together into one. Mobile phones and cameras, projectors, all of these things combine into something simple in your hand. And if it's got a touch screen, all the better. We're coming to the point where we're going to have three-dimensional touch screens where you move your finger closer and it will sense you moving it closer and make the picture larger for you and so on. And you'll be able to swipe it backwards and forwards without touching it. That's the next phase. And those products already exist in beta form. The virtuality continuum, if we go back to it again, we'll look and we'll see that augmented reality is over this side where the real world is being touched by the virtual world, and augmented virtuality is this side in reverse. And I'll show you what I mean by that. We've got the virtual here augmenting the real for augmented reality, and we've got the real augmenting the virtual for virtual reality. Now that's important to remember because somewhere in the middle is where all the learning happens, supposedly. And there are two types of augmented reality available. There's the phone app, which you may have one on your mobile phone already. If you've got Navigator or if you've got Leia or a similar downloadable app, you've already got a phone app that is augmented reality. But there's also the wearable technologies as well that are coming out now, which we'll talk about briefly if we've got the time. Augmented reality is where the technology actually recognizes what you're doing. It's smart enough to know where you are because of the GPS system in it or the camera, and then it'll add information to it to enhance that experience for you. So on the picture here you can see that there's a blue spot that's appeared up the road where the person is walking, and that is obviously something they're looking for, maybe a tube station or maybe another person who's using Twitter at the moment and you want to find out where they are. It will locate them for you. Leia, we've mentioned this. This is an application which you can download and it will display real-time information through the camera on your phone. It'll overlay it with all of the possible things that you need to be interested in just by you asking it to find them for you. And it will actually find those. And as you move it around, obviously the scene changes and so then does the information that's on it. And it will get larger or smaller depending on how important it is to you. As per your request. This is what we mean by augmented reality. You can, as I say, find the nearest tube station. There it is flashing up on the screen above the no entry sign there. You can see overlays of information about an object in front of you. This is some kind of monastery, I think in Spain or France. It will actually give you more information the longer you stand there. If you move away, it'll stop. And something else will come up. But the longer you stand there, the more information it will give you about that subject. You can visualize ancient worlds using the images of long-gone buildings, put them over the top of the present-day sites, and see what it might have looked like in them days, before it was demolished or destroyed by an earthquake or whatever. I think this is a temple of Knossos, isn't it, on Crete? Looks like it. There are also obvious training applications here. For instance, displaying an overlay onto something like a needle biopsy, where if you did it wrong, you'd be in trouble and the patient would die. So to practice with a kind of a simulation and overlay the items that you need to know about on them. Or also, this one here is an example of repairing a printer. You can actually see the insides of the printer without actually going inside it and doing damage. So you've got overlays that actually work. It almost acts like a metaphor. You don't need the language. All you need is the visualization of it so you can see where you're going and what you need to do next. And then it will instruct you further. Augmented virtuality is when you interact with your computer using objects in the physical world. That's the other type, the other side of the spectrum. Somebody said that we are natural-born cyborgs, that we act in affinity with technologies. I think that was Andy Clark a few years back, a British scholar. He said, look, we are actually interfacing with technology quite naturally now, and it's not a problem for most people to actually think about learning through a technology, provided the technology is quite transparent and you don't have to think too much about the technology itself. I think that's the secret. I'll give you three examples, or three points here about augmented reality and training. The first one is that it can support seamless interaction between people. By that I mean if you normally sit two people down, two trainees down, side by side at a computer, they'll be sharing the same physical space, they'll be able to talk to each other, but they'll be looking at something together on the screen. They won't be looking at each other. If you take an object and put it into three-dimensional space and project it in between them, they can face each other and they can see the object and each other as well. That's one step beyond where we're going now with training. May sound space age, but it's possible to do. The second one is using this interface metaphor, if you like. You don't have to worry about the language, about the nomenclature of what you're doing. All you need to do is see what you're doing and move it around. That way you understand the concept. And then you can understand the facts afterwards to go with it. The two then combine afterwards. And the ability to transition between virtual and real spaces, that's important if we're going to promote immersive types of experiences. We run a conference in Plymouth in April. This is not a shameless plug because there's an example here. And the week after Easter bank holiday, we have visits from people from the delegates list. They can sign up to go to our virtual immersion cinema. And it's a dome. Basically, it used to be an old planetarium. And in there, we can project 3D images, and you feel as if you're immersed into that experience. And you feel like the room's moving. It's not, and neither are you, but the visual images are moving around, and they're moving around in 3D, and you feel you can reach out and touch them. The surround sound helps as well. And that's a real immersive experience. People feel like they're actually there. This is the MIT Sixth Sense wearable. Who's seen this? Anybody? One or two maybe have seen it. You need to watch this video. Patty Maes, M-A-E-S, and MIT, the Sixth Sense wearable technologies. What you've got here is a wearable system. It's a lash-up, but the new versions, when they actually manufacture them and sell them, will be a lot sleeker than this. You've basically got a camera and a projector, a mirror, and a phone down below which connects them all together, a mobile phone which connects you to the internet. Then you've got 4 caps on your fingers, and you can do various things with those caps. The camera will recognize it, interpret it, and find the right images, and project them in front of you onto any surface. So, for instance, you can take a picture like that, and the picture will appear in front of you on the screen, projected as you take it. You can manipulate using natural gestures, move them around, move things out, make them larger, make them smaller, using these caps. The camera will recognize it and project it for you. You can project images onto any surface. Here's the Harry Potter newspaper. You can also even dial up on your hand. Project onto your hand and dial up using it. You can project onto your student. That's rather controversial. Oh, that's a student. That's a trainee over there. You know, he's a second-year trainee and whatever. So, but it's possible to do. And going back to the virtuality continuum again, you'll see that Sixth Sense is actually on the augmented virtuality side. It's about using the virtual world to touch the real world. And the other side, Layer and the handheld apps, those are augmented reality. That's the difference between them. I'm nearly finished now. I'm going to stop in a few moments. So just some possible uses for you to think about of smart tech, smart devices. One is that it can promote informal self-organized learning, which can then be linked to the curriculum or the training program or whatever it is that you're presenting with your organization. It can also be used for problem-based learning, which is a very powerful method we use in a variety of contexts, including medicine and nursing and so on. It can also promote group-based activities. You've probably seen some of the new iPhone applications where you can put 2 or 3 iPhones together and they can create new environments combined. Outdoor learning is obviously a potential, as are the others here, distance and blended learning, independent study. There are issues with smartphones and smart technologies. What do we mean by personalized learning, and how can we make sure that it's the right type of personal learning? This is for each training advisor and manager to decide. There are issues about connectivity, of course. Some of you may have connection problems in the room now. I've found this to be a very good Wi-Fi system, actually, one of the best in any conference I've been to. So thank you, Don, if you're listening. But you may have connectivity issues. You may not always be able to find a connection. Choosing a device, you may need advice with that. Your trainees definitely will if they don't know about smart technologies. Learning how to use it effectively, learning what it can be used for, and of course, as I said before, the bandwidth availability. And I'm going to stop there and say thank you very much for listening.